I'll never forget the night my wife lifted her glass at a crowded dinner table, laughed, and told a room full of executives that I was nothing more than dead weight in my own career. They all laughed with her, thinking I was some harmless fool who couldn't even defend himself. But they didn't know the truth, and neither did she. By the time the night was over, everyone in that ballroom would see me in a very different light. Before I tell you what happened, hit that subscribe button, give the story a like, and leave a comment with your city. I'd love to know where you're listening from. My name is Michael, and until that night, I believed my marriage to Lisa could survive anything. We had been married for 12 years, and I thought we had found some kind of rhythm. I worked as a government contracts negotiator, a position that demanded long hours, attention to detail, and nerves of steel. It wasn't glamorous work, not the kind you brag about at cocktail parties, but it mattered. I saved companies millions. I protected jobs. I did the work no one else wanted to touch. Lisa, on the other hand, lived for the spotlight. She craved attention, laughter, and approval. She thrived in the center of every conversation, and she treated me like a prop in her comedy routine. The night of the dinner, we were at the Grand Regent Hotel downtown. The place glowed like something out of a movie. Chandeliers sparkling, waiters gliding silently with trays of champagne, the sound of forks on porcelain echoing under the hum of polite laughter. The CEO of the company Lisa worked for, Patrick Thompson, was hosting the event with his wife, Emily. Lisa insisted that I come along because, in her words, spouses make you look respectable. I put on my black suit, the one I rarely wore, and followed her into a world where I never felt I belonged. We sat at a round table near the front. Patrick and Emily were there, along with several senior managers and their wives. The wine was flowing faster than the courses, and Lisa was already glowing with the attention. She laughed too loudly at every joke, leaned in too close to every compliment, and made sure her voice carried across the table. Then the first dig came, light like a flick on the shoulder. She joked that I spent my days fixing leaky faucets, as if I were some handyman barely keeping us afloat. People chuckled politely. I forced a smile, letting it roll off my back. The second came before the entree. Lisa told the table that I read contracts like bedtime stories, that if they ever needed help falling asleep, I was the man to call. Again, chuckles. I kept my eyes on the salad plate, pretending it didn't sting. I had lived with her jabs for years, and I thought silence was easier than confrontation. But then came the third one, the one that drew blood. Lisa leaned back in her chair, glass raised, and announced, "Honestly, I don't even know why he bothers going to work. Michael's job is so boring and pointless. He pushes paper all day. If I had married someone with ambition, I'd be living in a bigger house right now." The table erupted. Laughter rolled around me like a wave. Some tried to cover their smirks with napkins. Others glanced at me with pity. My pulse hammered in my ears, and I gripped my silverware to keep from shaking. I stared down at the tablecloth, refusing to look at her, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Lisa basked in the attention like a queen on her throne, sipping her wine as if she had just delivered the joke of the evening. Patrick shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He cleared his throat, about to change the subject, when Emily's hand came down hard on the table. The sound cut through the noise like a whip, silencing the laughter instantly. She turned her head slowly toward Lisa, her eyes sharp, her voice steady. "Do you even know what your husband does?" she asked. Lisa blinked, caught off guard. She waved her hand carelessly. "Contracts or something. He shuffles papers, right?" she said, her tone dripping with dismissal. Emily's lips tightened, her voice calm but cutting like steel. "Contracts or something. Without Michael negotiating that defense supply deal last year, this entire company would have collapsed. Hundreds of people sitting in this room would have lost their jobs. My husband's business, every one of our livelihoods, would have been destroyed." The silence that followed was suffocating. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Lisa's face drained of color, her mouth slightly open but unable to form words. Every eye shifted from Emily to me. Then Patrick lifted his glass slowly, deliberately. His voice rang out, To Michael, the man who saved us when no one else could. Chairs scraped as people rose, glasses lifted, and a toast thundered through the room. For the first time that night, the laughter wasn't at my expense. It was for me. Lisa sat frozen, her hand trembling against the stem of her wine glass, her mask of confidence cracking in front of everyone. That was the moment everything changed. The sound of glasses clinking echoed in my ears long after the toast ended, like a slow drumbeat marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. I sat perfectly still, my glass raised, but inside, I was fighting a storm. For years, I had taught myself to accept Lisa's little humiliations. They started as jokes among friends, harmless on the surface, and I convinced myself they weren't worth fighting over. But what she had done at that dinner was different. She hadn't just embarrassed me. She had stripped me bare in front of strangers, in front of her own boss, and reveled in it. And yet, she had no idea that the one person in the room who could end her charade had been sitting beside her the whole time. Emily's words cut sharper than any defense I could have given. And as the weight of silence settled over the table, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face before. I was done pretending her mockery didn't matter. The dinner carried on, though the mood had shifted completely. Conversations that had once been light and filled with shallow laughter turned heavy, directed toward me now, not her. For the first time in years, people actually wanted to hear what I had to say. They asked me about the deal Emily had mentioned, curious about how I had spotted flaws in a competitor's bid, how I had secured terms that no one else could. I spoke plainly, without exaggeration, without boasting, just laying out facts. Every word I said was like a quiet rebuttal to the years of jabs Lisa had thrown my way. And the more I spoke, the more I saw respect grow in the eyes around me. Lisa sat stiff in her chair, her forced smile faltering, her knuckles white as she clutched her glass like a lifeline. She tried to interject a few times, steering the conversation back toward herself, but no one followed her lead anymore. The room had turned, and the spotlight that she craved so desperately was gone. For once, she wasn't the star. She was the shadow, and she didn't know how to handle it. When dessert was served, Patrick stood and cleared his throat. His voice carried across the room, steady and deliberate. I want to thank everyone here for the dedication they've shown to this company. And I want to recognize one man in particular, Michael. Without his skill and persistence, this company would not be where it is today. We all owe him a debt of gratitude. His words landed like a hammer, sealing the truth in front of everyone. I felt my face warm, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from pride. Lisa's fork clattered against her plate. She looked at me with eyes that could have burned through steel, but I didn't flinch. I met her stare calmly, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. After the dinner, as we made our way through the crowded lobby, people stopped to shake my hand. They clapped me on the shoulder, some even thanking me personally. Lisa trailed behind me, her usual confident stride gone, her chin dipped, her silence deafening. In the elevator, she finally spoke, her voice low and venomous. "You could have told me," she hissed. I turned to her, my voice calm, deliberate. "I did, Lisa. I told you for years. You just never listened." She bit her lip, her face tight with rage, but she had no response. The elevator doors opened, and we walked out into the night air in silence. Driving home, she tried to recover. She talked too fast, her words tumbling over each other, trying to spin the evening into something it wasn't. She asked why Emily had spoken up, why I hadn't said anything to stop her, as though the betrayal wasn't her mocking me in front of everyone, but Emily daring to defend me. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the wheel. Each mile we drove felt like a mile farther from the man I used to be, the man who let her define me with her ridicule. When we got home, I lay in bed awake, staring at the ceiling. Lisa pretended to sleep beside me, but I could feel the tension radiating from her like heat. My mind replayed the moment Emily's voice cut through the laughter, the way Lisa's face drained of color, the way the room had shifted in an instant. I thought about the years I had wasted letting her tear me down in public and in private. I thought about the silence I had used as a shield, and I realized the truth. Silence had never protected me. It had only allowed her to keep cutting deeper. The next morning, the house felt heavy, as though the walls themselves had soaked up the tension of the night before. Lisa banged cupboards louder than necessary, slammed the coffee pot down on the counter, her silence louder than words. I sat at the table with the newspaper open, though I wasn't reading a single line. I kept seeing her face, the way her smile collapsed when Emily spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "You think you looked noble last night, don't you?" she muttered, her back to me. I folded the paper carefully and set it aside. "I didn't look noble," I said evenly. "I didn't say a word." Emily said everything that needed to be said. That was when she spun around, her eyes flashing, as if the mention of Emily's name was salt in an open wound. "She humiliated me, in front of everyone. Do you know how that made me look?" Her voice shook, teetering between rage and desperation. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. "You humiliated yourself, Lisa. You did that the moment you mocked me in front of the entire room." All Emily did was tell the truth. Her lips trembled, searching for a reply, but nothing came. Finally, she crossed her arms, her voice sharp with defiance. "I was joking. Everyone knew it. You're just too sensitive." I stood from the table, pushing the chair back slowly. "They didn't think it was a joke. They laughed at me, not with me. And even if it was a joke, it wasn't funny. Not after years of you making the same ones. Last night, you showed everyone what you really think of me." She turned away, her shoulders tense, but I could see the crack in her armor, the fear behind the anger. For the first time, she realized her stage had collapsed, and there was no applause left to save her. Later that day, as I sat in my office trying to concentrate on work, the phone rang. It was Patrick. His voice was warm, maybe even a little too warm, as though he felt the need to make up for what had happened the night before. "Michael," he said, "I just wanted to thank you again. I don't think I've ever told you directly how much that deal meant. Without you, we would have been looking at layoffs, maybe worse. You saved us, and I won't forget that." His words hit me harder than I expected. Validation. Not from Lisa, not from anyone else who had dismissed me over the years, but from the man who truly knew the stakes. I thanked him, keeping my voice professional, though inside I felt something stir that had been buried for a long time. When I hung up, I noticed Lisa standing in the doorway, arms crossed, her eyes narrow with suspicion. "So now you're friends with my boss," she said bitterly. I met her glare without flinching. "No, Lisa, I'm not friends with him. I'm respected by him. That's the difference." She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away, but her silence said more than her words ever could. The rest of the week passed in an odd quiet. Lisa avoided bringing up the dinner directly, but I caught her watching me differently. It wasn't admiration. It was something closer to fear, like she was seeing a stranger in her own house. At work, I noticed a change too. Colleagues who had once kept me at arm's length now made an effort to greet me, to shake my hand, to ask about my work. The story of that dinner had spread, and with it, so had the truth about what I had done. Every handshake felt like a small victory, not because I craved the attention, but because for once, I was being seen clearly. One evening when I walked through the door, Lisa was waiting for me in the kitchen. Her face was carefully composed, but I knew her too well not to see the tension behind it. "I don't like what's happening," she said flatly. I set my briefcase down, keeping my eyes steady on hers. "What don't you like?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "I don't like that everyone is talking about you, about how important you are." I let the silence stretch for a moment before replying. "No, Lisa, you don't like that people finally see me for who I am. You don't like that your words no longer define me." She didn't deny it. She just turned away, her silence the only confirmation I needed. That weekend, Patrick hosted a smaller dinner at his home. It wasn't a corporate gala this time, just a gathering of close colleagues and friends. I hadn't expected an invitation, but when the envelope arrived with his handwritten note thanking me again, I knew Lisa saw it too. The flicker in her eyes when she read it told me everything. She realized her boss valued me more than he valued her endless chatter at the office. Still, she insisted on going with me, probably in a desperate attempt to salvage some piece of her dignity. As we pulled into Patrick and Emily's sprawling driveway, lined with cars, I felt something strange, a calm I hadn't known in years. Inside, the mood was warm, laughter spilling from the living room where a fire glowed in the hearth. Emily greeted us at the door, her smile genuine. "Michael, I'm so glad you came," she said warmly, her tone carrying a respect that wasn't forced. Lisa forced her own smile, her voice pitched too high as she clung to my arm. "We wouldn't miss it," she said, though her grip told me otherwise. Throughout the evening, I noticed how conversations shifted toward me without me trying. People asked about my work, about the contracts I had negotiated, about the deal Emily had mentioned at the dinner. I answered simply, factually, but each time I spoke, I saw admiration in their eyes. Lisa sat beside me, unusually silent, her wine glass her only shield. For once, she didn't interrupt. She didn't dare. At one point, Patrick rose, tapping his glass lightly. The room quieted, and he looked directly at me. "I want to raise a toast," he said. "Not to profits or contracts, but to the people behind them." Michael reminded us that success isn't about showmanship. It's about substance. He gave us a future when we thought we had lost it. And for that, I owe him more than words can say. Glasses lifted, the sound of the toast ringing like a slow, steady drumbeat. Heat rose in my face, but this time it wasn't shame. It was pride. Lisa's lips pressed into a thin line as she clinked her glass half-heartedly. Later that night, while I was in the kitchen pouring myself a drink, Emily approached me privately. "I hope you don't mind what I said the other night," she began. "I couldn't stand listening to her tear you down like that. It was cruel and everyone knew it. Someone had to speak the truth." I met her eyes and nodded. "You didn't embarrass me, Emily. You gave me back my voice." She smiled softly. "Good. You deserved that." When Lisa and I left the party, she was silent all the way home. Not the sulking silence I had grown used to, but something heavier, as though she was wrestling with the reality that she could no longer control the story about who I was. When we pulled into the driveway, she finally spoke. "You'll never let me live this down, will you?" she said bitterly. I turned to her, my voice calm, steady. "I don't have to. You already did it to yourself. And now the truth is out there. No one can unhear it." She slammed the door and stormed inside, leaving me alone in the car. But for the first time in years, her anger didn't crush me. I sat there in the dark, breathing slowly, realizing I felt free. The chains of her ridicule had broken the moment Emily spoke up, and nothing Lisa did now could bind me again. I knew there would be battles ahead. Long nights of arguments, bitterness, maybe worse. But the difference was clear. I no longer doubted my worth. And when a man finally knows his value, no amount of laughter, no cruel joke, no false smile can take it away. The weeks that followed were strange, like living in a house where the walls whispered secrets you couldn't unhear. Lisa moved around with a sharpness in her steps. Every slammed cabinet door and clattering dish an unspoken accusation. She tried to reclaim her old stage with jokes or cutting remarks, but they no longer landed. Friends who once laughed along now looked at her differently, and that unsettled her more than anything I could have said. One evening, she snapped. "You think you're some kind of hero now, don't you?" She spat across the dinner table, her wine glass trembling in her hand. I looked at her calmly. "No, I don't think I'm a hero. I just finally know my worth. And the difference is now everyone else does too." She sneered, but I saw the panic flicker behind her eyes. For the first time in our marriage, she was losing control of the narrative, and she knew it. The more she tried to cling to her old habits, the more they unraveled. At a neighbor's gathering, she attempted to make another of her cutting jokes at my expense. The room fell silent. No one laughed, and the awkward pause that followed left her cheeks burning red. Later that night, she raged at me, accusing me of turning everyone against her. But the truth was simple. She had turned them against herself. I didn't need to fight her. The truth had already done that for me. The power she once wielded so easily had slipped through her fingers, and she couldn't accept it. It was during one particularly heated argument that the final crack appeared. "I can't live like this," she shouted, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "I can't live with you constantly being praised, constantly being respected like you're better than me." I stood, my voice steady but firm. "Lisa, this isn't about being better. It's about respect. Something you never gave me. Something I allowed you to strip from me for years. But not anymore." She froze, her lips parting, but no words came out. For once, she had no comeback, no quick insult to hide behind. She just stared at me, and in that silence, I realized I was done. The decision didn't come with anger, came with clarity. The marriage had been eroded by years of mockery, belittling, and silence. That dinner had pulled back the curtain, and there was no way to close it again. The next morning, I told her plainly, "I want a divorce." Her face twisted with disbelief. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "You're just upset." I shook my head. "No, Lisa. For the first time, I'm not upset. I'm clear. We've been living a lie, and I won't do it anymore." She tried everything, pleading, blaming, even threatening. But nothing could shake my decision. The power she had once held was gone, and she knew it. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Divorce isn't clean. It's messy, painful, and full of moments that test every ounce of resolve you have. Lisa oscillated between fury and desperation, one day insisting I'd regret it, the next begging for another chance. But I didn't waver. Each time I thought about giving in, I remembered that night at the Hyatt, the laughter ringing in my ears, and the way Emily's words had cut through it all with the truth. I had lived too long in the shadow of mockery. I wasn't going back. When the papers were finally signed, I walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the giddy kind, but a steady, grounded freedom that comes when a weight you've carried for too long is finally lifted. Friends reached out. Colleagues congratulated me not just on my work but on taking back my life. Even Patrick called again, offering me opportunities that Lisa could never have imagined for me. Each conversation reminded me that I had stepped into a new chapter, one built not on someone else's approval, but on my own worth. Lisa faded from my world quickly after that. I heard bits and pieces, whispers about how she struggled at work, how her sharp tongue no longer charmed but alienated. But I didn't dwell on it. Her story was no longer mine. My story was the one I was finally writing for myself. The man who once sat silently at a dinner table, humiliated by laughter, was gone. In his place stood someone who had found his voice, his strength, and his freedom. I learned something powerful through it all. Sometimes the most cutting revenge is not shouting, not arguing, not fighting back. It's simply stepping into the truth of who you are and refusing to be diminished any longer. Lisa mocked me for years, but in the end, her mockery was the very thing that destroyed her hold on me. And when the truth came out, it wasn't just her laughter that died. It was the entire illusion she had built around our marriage. Now, when I think back to that night, I don't hear the sting of her words anymore. I hear the silence that followed Emily's defense of me. I hear the respect in Patrick's voice. I hear the sound of glasses clinking in a toast that wasn't about showmanship but about substance. And I hear my own voice, calm and steady, telling Lisa the words she never expected. I want a divorce. That was the real turning point. Not the dinner, not the applause, but the moment I chose freedom over chains. So if you've ever been mocked, belittled, or made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love you, remember this. The truth has a way of rising, and when it does, it will set you free. And sometimes, walking away isn't defeat. It's the only victory that truly matters. If the story spoke to you, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and leave a comment with your city below. I want to hear from you because no one should ever forget their worth.